Hello, my name's Emma and I'm the Education Officer for Westmill Sustainable Energy Trust. Thank you for choosing to use our video presentation. This first slide is really for anybody who's presenting this video. I just wanted to let you know that you can find associated documents on our website at this link. These include a lesson plan, a delivery guide. Now that will enable you to give children a little bit more detail and background and answer further questions. There's also some further points for discussion there as well. Worksheets, these can be printed off. There's a black and white version as well as a colour version, and there's also one that's fillable, so you can download it and save it and then have it filled on a laptop or tablet. And there's worksheet answers as well. On most slides that you will see that there are questions highlighted in orange. There are also some other questions that I'll ask throughout the presentation. Do please feel free to pause the presentation after any question. I'll try and leave a short gap so that children who are watching the presentation on their own have a chance to think about their answers. However, please pause it at any time that you feel it will be useful for children to deliberate or discuss their answers. There are also tasks throughout the presentation, and this is another opportunity to pause it and then give them an opportunity to fill in the worksheets that are associated with the presentation. But do please feel free to pause it at any time. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to our final lesson in this series, Lesson 6, A Sustainable Future. In this lesson we're going to be looking a little bit at sustainable development and learning how we can all contribute towards this and live more sustainably. So let's make a start. If you remember, we looked at sustainability in Lesson 3 and we talked about it a bit since. So I wonder if you can tell me which of the sentences below defines sustainable development. So the first option is a society where everyone is able to buy cheaper products, cheaper energy and have more choice. And the second one is a society where everyone's needs are met whilst the needs of future generations are always considered and so provided for. Have a think and choose which one you think it is. Well, the answer is the second one, because sustainability is about fulfilling people's needs, but also making sure that there's plenty left for future generations. Well done if you got that. We are now in the fortunate position where we have both the technology and the skills to build a more sustainable future. I wonder what your vision of a greener, sustainable future would look like. Have a think and consider the following questions. How would we make electricity? What type of jobs would we be doing? What type of buildings might we live in? What methods of transport might we use? And what other benefits would your green future offer? It's a good idea to pause the video at this time and have a chat and to think about those things. With discussion and sharing ideas, we can often come up with new and exciting ones. I included that last video clip as I think some of the designs for sustainable buildings of the future are really exciting. With the exception of one, they're all still concepts, that's design ideas. However, it's really good to see that both architects and designers are including sustainable aspects in their work. We should all be thinking about why we are working towards a sustainable future and have a clear vision of what we would like to see. That might be clean air and water that's safe and accessible to everyone, or that thousands of animal and plant species are no longer endangered and can grow and thrive without threat. It may be that there are sustainable sources of food and water for everyone, and this is so important. And that all energy and fuel is green and renewable. Now have a think about this. Do you think that universal access to green energy or renewable energy could help put an end to hunger and poverty? Well, this might seem like a huge task, but it's so important and something we should all be working towards. Now, energy poverty, that is, lack of access to energy, decreases chances of things like education and therefore prosperity, that's people growing and thriving. But access to reliable low-cost green energy enables things like communication, education, better living conditions, so that contributes to fewer health issues, and importantly, modern farming methods, including things like use of machinery and irrigation, which enables people to be more self-sufficient. So I think the answer is yes, access to green energy or renewable energy could significantly improve people's lives and contribute towards putting an end to hunger and poverty. I wonder if you can think of an example from a previous lesson where this has happened. Well, I can think of a couple. The first one is William Kamkwamba building the turbine to harness the wind and bring electricity to his farm and his village. The second one is Little Sun's project to bring low-cost solar-powered lighting to remote places. So I think it's a really positive thing that we're all now in a position to act and contribute towards sustainable development. We've already looked at well-known campaigners like Greta Thunberg and David Attenborough, but each of us can make our voices heard. It's really important to say this should never be done with aggression or violence, and everybody will be able to find different ways that suit them. Some people choose to protest against producers and practices that are damaging the planet, so they might go on marches. Other people campaign for positive action to be taken by governments and corporations, and they might do this online or by using petitions. How do you think we can get our leaders and governments to listen and act? Well, oftentimes we are louder if we speak with a group voice. And this can be done by joining groups like Friends of the Earth or Youth Strike for Climate, or even supporting formal petitions, or you could, on your own, you could just write to your MP. I would say though, do be very careful when using and reading social media, and remember that not everything on there is trustworthy, and other users may respond negatively to your opinions if you use these forums to voice them. If you're concerned about this or something like this has happened to you, do make sure you talk to an adult that you can trust.
Hi guys! Do you have time for a few quick questions? I see you're having a lot of fun, but do you ever stop and think if what you do is sustainable? And do you know what sustainable development means? Sustainable development is to make the world a better place for everyone now without destroying the possibilities for the next generations. If you wonder if something is sustainable, you can ask yourself, can we do this over and over again forever? Sustainable development means that we need to keep three things in mind at once: social progress, economic development, and climate and environment. First of all, we have to take care of our planet. We have many natural ecosystems that must be in balance in order for us to live here. The climate system is one of them. This system ensures that the temperature is correct and that the atmosphere emits exactly the right amount of solar energy. When we emit harmful greenhouse gases, such as CO2, we clog the atmosphere. This changes the temperatures on Earth, which again affects our development. How we produce and use energy is incredibly important. Oil and coal are examples of energy we may run out of. Water, wind, and sun, however, will always be here. Using the lasting sources of energy that renew themselves is good for the planet and can provide jobs for years to come. Economics. Almost everything we develop, buy, and trade starts with nature. The smarter we use our natural resources and the better systems we create for a fair distribution, the more sustainable we are. One way to contribute to a more uneven distribution is to be more aware of what we buy and how it is produced. A football is a good example. It travels far before it reaches the football players. First, the materials are made. Then, they print the logo somewhere else before a third country sews it all together. One single football sees the whole world before it reaches its goal. This journey ties us together. If we are to win the battle for a sustainable future, we have to play with fair rules that applies to everyone. Social progress. We humans are part of nature, but we're also important resources for the world. Just like water, the forest, and the sun, we have minds that can create the strangest and most creative things. But for us to be the best versions of ourselves, there are certain things that must be in order, like having equal opportunities to education, safety, food, and medicine. This provides greater opportunities for us as human beings, but also for the planet. We just have to think in new ways. These three must work together. That is sustainable development. And there is actually a plan for this. All the countries of the United Nations have agreed on a joint plan for sustainable development. But for the plan to work, we need to cooperate, and we need you to be on board. Are you with us?
So we're going to look in a bit more detail now at some of the sustainable development points raised in that video, and we'll start with the environment. Now, it's important that we look after our environment, and we should be working towards healing our planet. Remember we talked about ecosystems. Well, just to recap, an ecosystem can be defined as a community of living organisms and their physical environment, so where they live, and also the relationship between all the organisms, their environment, and how they support and benefit one another. We should be protecting our ecosystems and habitats, and reducing pollution and working towards being carbon neutral. But what does this term carbon neutral actually mean? Well, simply put, it means that our carbon emissions should be zero. However, we will always have some carbon emissions, so we need to ensure that any carbon we produce should be able to be taken out of the atmosphere. This is also known as carbon offsetting, and ultimately that results in something called net zero. One of the best ways of doing this is by harnessing the power of trees. They naturally take carbon out of the atmosphere, something called carbon capture, which is why managed forestry and reforestation, that is replanting trees, is so important. There are other more complex means of carbon capture. In fact, a paint has recently been developed specifically to do this. So in what ways do you think that we can all work towards reducing pollution? Well, these are things we've talked about before, so you might have come up with things like energy use, that is, using renewable energy where possible, and being aware of our energy use, so turning off lights and gadgets, showering instead of having a bath, and using things like low energy light bulbs. You may have said food and our eating habits, So it could be things like eating less meat and more vegetables that are in season. Could be reducing food miles and shopping locally. Or cutting down on packaging, for example, by buying from markets or taking your own storage boxes and bags to refill. You may also have said travel and thought about things like walking or cycling for short journeys, using public transport, and reducing air travel. A hugely important part of looking after our environment is the conservation of our wildlife. When we talked about ecosystems, we mentioned the word habitat. A habitat is where an animal or organism lives and thrives. There are many different habitats across the world. This could be anything from rainforest to grassland to Arctic tundra. Wildlife that needs certain habitats to survive and thrive will decrease when that habitat is destroyed. Sadly, habitats have been destroyed all over the world by various means, including pollution, we've already talked about, deforestation, which is the removal of trees, and desertification. That is when thriving habitats and fertile land become desert. This might be caused by something like drought, but oftentimes it's a man-made problem and comes about through things like deforestation and also inappropriate agriculture, so people farming and taking the goodness out of the land, cutting down trees and removing habitat so that they can farm. Unfortunately, habitat destruction has had a huge impact on animal numbers all over the world. I've mentioned some already, but what other human actions cause this type of destruction and so threaten wildlife? Well, we've mentioned clearing land for agriculture, but actually clearing areas of land for development is also one of the biggest causes of habitat destruction. Habitats can also be destroyed by illegal logging, mining, and that's both pit and surface. Remember, we spoke about those in earlier lessons. Urban growth, landfill, that's the disposal of waste, and any other sort of inappropriate waste disposal, so that might be burning waste. It's sad but important to note that habitat destruction is currently the primary cause of animal extinctions worldwide. But what does the term extinction mean? Extinction is where all known individuals in a species, family, or a group of animals or plants has died out. The issue of extinction is both sad and worrying, but it's really important to stress that as long as we act now, we can reduce the rate of extinction in animals currently at risk, including tigers, rhinos, whales, elephants, and many more.
Good morning. For more than 20 years now, I've been a contributing photographer for National Geographic magazine, and I've traveled around the world and taken pictures mainly on conservation issues. And I realized that what I'm doing here in the wild is just not enough. Through my career, I have seen more and more species head towards extinction. More and more. It's just not enough. So now I'm in the second act of my career. I'm 50 years old. Maybe I have another 20 years left, maybe, if I'm lucky. What am I going to do to save species? I went from doing this to taking black and white backgrounds with me and doing this. Instead of being in the bushmeat market only with the drill that's going to become supper that night for someone, took black velvet and make him immortal. So I started doing this more and more everywhere I can go. Everywhere Geographic sends me, every continent, every state, all the time, 8 years ago. I call it the photo arc. The goal is to get animals on black and white backgrounds and to get people to care. That's it. Look them in the eye. See how amazing amphibians are? Whatever I have to do to get people to care. What's it going to take? I don't know. So far, it hasn't worked out too well for me. I'm seeing almost 50% of the amphibians either at extinction now or at risk of extinction. This one, at a lab in Ecuador, down to 8, 7, 5 or 4, couple. Now you're looking at the very last one. See, we're talking about extinction today. I see these species right before they go extinct. That's where I come in. And I try to get the world to care about something as tragic as this. The very last Rab's fringed limb tree frog at the Atlanta Botanical Gardens. And I'm up close and I look him in the eye and I think, holy cow, I really need to tell the world about this. Surely they would stop driving things to extinction if they knew. Well, not so, I'm afraid. Here's the very last Columbia Basin pygmy rabbit. It's extinct now. Did anybody care? If I can't get people to care about that, am I going to get them to care about this last remaining pool of water that holds an insect, an invertebrate that's aquatic? Or something without eyes even that we can relate to? Freshwater mussels. 75–80% of them are in need of federal protection now. They clean our water. They tell us something's drastically wrong. Or an insect that's down to a couple hundred animals in my hometown of Lincoln, Nebraska. What do I have to do? Do I have to photograph animals that are electrified in color, or have a smile on their face, or might be deadly, or just are plain weird looking, or anthropomorphic? What do I have to do? I think about this question all the time. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Every class of animal now is at risk. We're at risk of losing half of all species by the turn of the next century. We know it's bad. What to do? Well, what I've come down to is this. After 8 years, I've photographed nearly 3,000 species this way, out of the 6,000 species captive. My goal, if I live this long, is to get all the captive species in the world, to get people engaged, to get the public engaged. That's the thing. How do we do this? We have to make it interesting. We have to get people off the couch. We have to get them to care about more than the price at the pump and what's on television. We have to engage them and get them to meet these animals face to face. Most people live in cities now. They don't live out in the country. They're never going to have a chance to see these things unless they get involved somehow and look at these animals right in the eye. We have to make it interesting. We have to make it fun. We have to get it so that the public actually stops and thinks about it being popular. Popular to care about animals. Yes, indeed. We see it with social media. We see it with trends in fashion. We see it every day. People will save something if they think other people are saving it. They will only follow each other. Somehow in this discussion we're having today, and I want to see species brought back from extinction as much as anybody, believe me, we must make it so that it is popular and mandatory to be good stewards of the earth. That is the thing. That is the rub. How do we get there? I don't know. Tick, tick, tick. Time's running out, isn't it? Can we do it? Absolutely we can. So far, most of what you've seen here does not have to go away. It's dying off for lack of attention. We just need to get this on the public's radar screen. Have we done it before? You bet we have. We've done it many times. We've saved the giant panda so far. And some of these animals that you're seeing here got down to 20 animals or fewer. We can do this. Absolutely. There's no time to lose, though, is there? No time to lose. I often get discouraged if I'm out in the field and I'm seeing the last of something and I think, holy cow, what am I going to do? How do I get people to care? Is it worth it? Absolutely. Margaret Mead once said so famously, "Never doubt that a small group of concerned citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Thank you.
So with that really inspiring video in mind, we're going to look at task 1, a world without. Now, when we hear about large numbers of animals that are endangered, it can be frightening and upsetting. I find it so, and I'm an adult. And the best thing that we can do is recognise the problem. But then we need to take action. But what action can we take? Well, one way in which we can do this is by education. So that means talking to each other, our friends and our families, to raise awareness of the risks of extinction. So as a starting point with this, we're asking you to select and research an endangered species of your choice, and then to design a campaign poster to raise awareness. Now, this is also on your worksheet, so you can use that as a guide, and there's room for you to fill in some of these notes. But some of the questions you need to be asking yourself and researching are where your animal comes from, any facts about your animal, including the current numbers, how many numbers are left if you can find that out, what factors have caused numbers to decline, and what can be done to save the animal from extinction. So we want what's called a call to action, something that we can work towards. Now have a go and then we'll look at this together. If you'd like to press pause to allow time to complete task 1 on the worksheet, do so now. You can then press play to continue watching the presentation. Well, I'm sure that everybody chose different animals, but what we're going to do is look at one specific animal that I've chosen and talk through those questions we asked you to research and give some examples. So I've chosen the African wild dog, and they are found in Southeast Africa. For the next question, any facts including current numbers, I've put that they are also called painted wolves or painted dogs. They live in tight family packs and all the females contribute towards childcare. They can run at over 44 miles per hour. And population in 2021 is thought to be around fewer than 7,000. They are also highly intelligent. What factors have caused numbers to decline? Well, very sadly, they're killed by farmers. They catch diseases from domestic dogs. And also increased human population has caused the loss of their habitat. So, what can be done to save the animal from extinction? Well, firstly, habitat conservation. We need to look at how we ensure they have the habitat that they need. We can work with local communities and farmers to help them protect their livestock. If the livestock are protected from the wild dogs, then farmers don't need to kill the wild dogs. We also need to encourage stopping the use of poisons for pest control. And if we monitor wild dogs' movements, we can get an idea of where they live, how big their range is, so how far they move, and also the numbers. There are several charities now doing this, including Painted Dog Conservation. You can see their logo on the right there, and their website is also listed on this slide. It's worth having a look into, and there are many other charities focused on specific animal species. So I haven't done a poster here, but I'm sure the ones you've created are fabulous. I'd really love to see them, and if you can and would like to, you can tweet us at @WeSetEducate on Twitter, and that address is also at the end of this video. We're now going to take a look at economic sustainability. Unfortunately, in this country, we're increasingly used to buying fast, cheap and often, and frequently products that are made abroad. Whilst companies vary, and this is not always an indicator of their ethical standards, it is important to be aware of several factors when buying products, and these include who made them, how they are made, what materials they are made from, and how far they have travelled to reach us. So when we think about who made them, we need to consider what conditions they worked in, how well they were paid, what hours they worked, and also did they receive any benefits, things like health care. When we look at how they are made, we need to know if they're being made using quality materials. Are the operatives and workers who make them able to take time and care in their production, or do they have high targets to meet? And what is the level of quality control? Thinking about what materials they're made from, most materials and fibres have natural origin. Natural resources are not limitless, so materials should be used in a sustainable way. The materials and resources used are not just those used in the product itself, but also those used in the factory and in the production line, for example, things like fuels and water. We should think about product miles, or how far they've travelled to reach us. It's all very well ordering online or buying in a shop, but how far has the product actually travelled to reach you? Many products, like the football mentioned in the video earlier, make several stops, with the materials being produced in one location and manufacture taking place in one or more other locations, and that's even before packaging and transportation to the buyer. So here's an interesting point for discussion. If you can buy a t-shirt in a UK high street store for as little as £2, which you can, what do you think this might tell you about the t-shirt's manufacture? I'll give you a chance to talk about this. Well, this should cause you to stop and think, and even do a little bit of research into the retailer. While some companies are able to keep things no frills and purchase in bulk, keeping the prices low, a low price point might also be a red flag. Interestingly though, companies are increasingly publicising their ethical credentials. H&M and Primark are amongst those companies. It is important, however, to get an independent view, and there are websites that you can visit that give you an excellent view of what the company is actually doing. If you go online and search for ethical consumer and then put the name of the company you're interested in after it, you'll get that page. We're going to talk about tackling social issues. It's sad to say that it's often the poorest and most vulnerable people that are hit first and hit hardest by climate change and the resulting droughts, flooding and so on. So how do you think drought caused by lack of rainfall can affect people's livelihoods? Well, drought is lack of water. So drought affects access to water for drinking, both for people and farm animals. It affects basic hygiene, so washing and cleaning, and importantly agriculture, so there can be a loss of crops or livestock leading to a lack of food, loss of work, loss of income and ultimately ill health. Social sustainability is about addressing several key factors. So let's start with equality. That is, making sure that people have equal opportunities and access to a range of things, including education, work, clean water, healthcare and energy. Diversity. This means we have to reduce division between people and ensure that we're inclusive and create ways for people of all backgrounds to contribute. We need to learn about one another and celebrate both the things we have in common and our differences. Community. We should create supportive, proactive, diverse communities in which everyone can participate and work towards shared goals. Fairness. We must ensure that fair prices are paid to producers and workers, and that working conditions are good and human rights are upheld. Healthcare. Making access to healthcare available and accessible to all. Safety. By providing safe drinking water, safe working conditions, but also offering protection, asylum and refuge to those who are affected by war or displacement. And finally, empowerment. So firstly, that's done through all the things we've already mentioned, but also by empowering people of all nationalities to work, lead, plan and make decisions that will positively affect the sustainable development of their communities. We mentioned there the impact that climate crisis and climate emergencies can have on the health and well-being of people. So do you think that universal access to healthcare and sanitation is a basic human right? Well, interestingly, the World Health Organization's constitution, which was written back in 1946, stated that the highest attainable standard of health as a fundamental right of every human being. So that was their goal. Their website also goes on to make this statement. Understanding health as a human right creates a legal obligation on states to ensure access to timely, acceptable and affordable healthcare of appropriate quality, as well as providing for the underlying determinants of health, such as safe and portable water, sanitation, food, housing, health-related information and education, and gender equality. So yes, I think by and large most of us would agree that access to healthcare and sanitation is a basic human right. This is perhaps a good point to think about how fortunate we are in the UK to have access to free healthcare at the point of need. This means that if you or I are in trouble or unwell, we can go to the hospital or to the doctor's surgery and we can get that care. We don't have to think about whether we can afford it or not. This is not the case in many countries all over the world. I hope you'll agree with me that education is a really important part of sustainable development and creating a sustainable future. Do you think that every child on this planet has access to education? If you don't, I wonder if you know why this might be. Well, there are many reasons why children don't have access to education, and these can include things like lack of money to pay for schooling, how close they are to schools, whether they're actually needed to work at home. This could be, for example, on farms or even looking after relatives. Gender comes into play. In some situations, girls' education is a lower priority and they're required to work at home or expected to marry young. Children might not have access to education due to disabilities, because schools can't cater for that, or because they live in an area where it's dangerous due to natural disasters or war. So, we should never take education for granted. Education empowers us and can also teach us to be more sustainable as well. Whether you're educated at home or at school, sustainability can be integrated into every subject that we learn. I wonder if you can think how you could help your school or whatever your learning environment is to become more sustainable. Well, you could start by thinking about the building itself. How well insulated is it? Is the energy that's used sustainable, renewable energy? And what about the possibility of generating energy using solar panels, for example? Is waste limited? And does the school recycle efficiently? Are all single-use plastics banned? Are lights, computers and appliances turned off every day? And is the lighting low energy? Does the school encourage cycling or walking to school, or do they use shared transport? Have they tried to reduce paper usage, and do they recycle printer and photocopier cartridges? Do they compost food waste? Is your school part of the Green Flag Eco School scheme? If not, this is definitely something worth looking into. You could also use a school sustainability audit, and these are available on the Eco Schools site. So let's take a look at Task 2, Sustainable Subjects. Once again, if you'd like to, you can press pause to allow time to complete the task, and then press play to continue. Let's see how you've done. We asked you to match the sustainable topics below with some of the subjects you may study at school. So the topics are listed in the green and the subjects in the blue above. Let's have a look. So in food technology, we look at how our food is produced and how it is transported. In geography, we learn about the impact of human activity on the natural world. In science, we learn about ecosystems and the importance of biodiversity for the health of the planet. In maths, we calculate the number of wind turbines needed to supply a small town with electricity. And in design and technology, we look at sustainable materials and design and life cycles of products. Well done if you got those, some of them were quite tricky. But how about the other subjects that you take? It's worth thinking about how sustainability could be taught in other lessons like English, history, art and design, music, PE, computing, languages, PHSE, citizenship, The list goes on. So I think the message is that we're all in a position to make a difference, but making good choices at home and at school is an excellent place to start. It's also important to recognise and continue the good habits you already have. Can you think of one sustainable lifestyle change that you or your family have made recently? Well, there are lots of things you could have thought of, and I probably won't list them all here by a long way, but they might have included things like stopping buying packaged items or less packaging, using shops and brands that offer refill options, upcycling existing products that you have, using charity shops or walking or cycling to school, maybe going plastic free, or choosing a renewable energy provider. I know there are lots more. So in the next few slides, we're going to look at some of the actions you can take. We're going to start by looking at the 6 R's. There's actually different numbers of R's, but we've chosen to use the 6 R's here as it's a good place to start, and they're also relatively easy to remember. Each of the R's is an action that you can take, and using them will help you make little changes so that you can see results. So here's a question. Which of the following words do you think are the 6 R's? Well, there's a lot of R's to go through, but let's have a look. Reuse, recycle, refuse, rethink, repair, and finally, reduce. Let's take a closer look at those. We're going to start with refuse. This is an interesting one as some people might associate that word with stubbornness or negativity, but it is in fact an empowering action and it can have a genuine impact. Refusing to use a product or material that isn't sustainable is a positive action. It often means we need to change our behaviour, but actually this is easier than it sounds. So in the case of plastic disposable water bottles, this might be choosing a reusable water bottle instead. Now, some people feel that their not buying a product may have little impact on what is a huge issue, but what if they and/or their friends take action too? What if word gets around and hundreds of people act? In these days of social media and sharing, word can get around. In fact, it's interesting that in response to customers refusing to buy some unnecessarily packaged products and asking for less or more easily recycled packaging, several supermarkets are already making changes. So, why might we choose to refuse to buy some cheap fashion that is made abroad? Well, thinking back to when we talked about economic sustainability, we have to ask ourselves, do we know who is making the product, how much they are paid, what conditions they work in, what is the level of quality, and how far the product has travelled? In many countries all over the world, reuse is very much a way of life. For example, if you visit some African countries, you'll see day-to-day products being reused in clever ways. An example might be a tyre being reused as the sole of a shoe, or old electrical wires cleverly being made into beautiful jewellery. The good news is these are practices that are growing in the UK too, and we more often nowadays hear words like repurposing and upcycling. Not only can these be enjoyable and very satisfying, but they make economic and environmental sense, as fewer new materials and fuels are needed to produce new products. It also helps us move away from being a throwaway society, as in recent years we've had a tendency to just buy products and packaging and throw them away at the end of their use. But what other benefits are there of reusing or repurposing objects we might already have? Well, for starters, it's a way of saving money, not having to buy more new items. There's also the satisfaction of creativity and developing new problem-solving skills. If you look online, there are some excellent and exciting ways of recycling day-to-day items we might have in the house. It might be an interesting activity to present an item that you've reused or upcycled at home. And to keep things simple, your theme could be repurposing packaging, for example. Have a look at the picture on the right. That's an interesting starting point. We should all nowadays be familiar with recycling, and I would hope that all of us have been recycling for some time. Some materials are more easily recycled than others. For example, an aluminium can could be recycled time and time again, whereas plastics and paper will degrade the more they're recycled. But this doesn't mean that the resulting materials can't be used and reused. They will just be used for different purposes. An example might be a plastic detergent bottle may end up as a children's outdoor play area, as that plastic can be recycled, remoulded and used in play equipment. Or recycled printer paper may end up as newspaper print. Again, recycling materials reduces our reliance on new resources and so preserves finite resources. But let's have a think. Is recycling a carbon neutral solution? Well, the process of recycling is not actually a carbon neutral process, as processing plants require energy and resources like water. However, increasingly these plants are looking to reduce their carbon footprints. So, whilst recycling should not necessarily be the first action we take, things like reducing and refusing should come first, recycling is an important part of any circular economy. This means it puts the material back into the production process, so it can go round again. There are also ways to offset carbon emissions from recycling, working towards net zero. Different councils have different arrangements for recycling. It might be interesting to try and find out what happens to the items you recycle after they're collected at the roadside, for example where they're taken and what happens to them next. If you want to know this, a useful website to use is the Recycle Now website. Rethinking is just that. It's thinking again about the products that we use and that we buy. It's also thinking again about the way that we live day to day. Before we consume, we might ask ourselves questions like, do I really need this? Do I already have something that will do the job? Should I buy from this supermarket or from a street market where they don't use packaging? Can I take my own packaging when buying certain foods? And so on. Can you think of any initiatives introduced into shops that have had a positive impact on the amount of waste we generate? Well, good examples include things like the 5p bag scheme. So we've rethought the way we shop. We usually take our own bags now. Things like the wonky veg scheme. So again, we've rethought about whether we need straight carrots all the time, whether we can have something that's a little bit more natural. Refill schemes, and also reducing packaging and plastic-free schemes. These have all had an impact on the waste we generate, but have also made us rethink about the way we shop. Up until recently, the repairability of a product was a consideration when we bought something new. The slogan "Make Do and Mend" was first coined during World War II when clothes rationing was introduced, and mending favourite clothes remained a way of cherishing loved items for years to come. This is something we do far less now. And in recent years, the price of clothing has come down so far that we've become a nation who buy new virtually every season. As much as it might feel exciting to buy new, and trends change so quickly, if you have a favourite coat or pair of jeans, you may well find that when they begin to wear, you're unable to replace them with the same style. So why not mend them? Sadly, many manufacturers and brands want our repeat custom as soon as possible, so they encourage us to buy new on a regular basis. As a result, many products are not made to last. If a product is not made to last, to either break or fail or to become outdated, for example like a mobile phone, that is called built-in obsolescence. Now it's a long word, obsolescence, but to be obsolete basically means not to be useful anymore. You might be surprised to hear how often obsolescence is built into the products that we buy. And there's another good reason then, if we have quality products, for looking after them and mending them. So can you suggest a fun and attractive way to mend a hole in a pair of jeans? Well, there are lots of ways of doing this, and it can actually be done to hide the mend, but it's a bit more interesting if you recognise the fact that they're well worn and well loved, and you use something that'll stand out. You can buy ready-made patches or use coloured thread to stitch the hole up, or you can create your own patch from contrasting fabric. This is something creative and satisfying you can do. The final R we're looking at is reduce. Many of us in the Western world now have more than we need. However, there are plenty of people, both here and in other countries, who do not have enough. That could be food or access to energy, water, or even housing. Unfortunately, it's all too easy, especially when it comes to food shopping, to buy more than we can consume and so end up creating waste. We need to go back to the last R, rethink. We need to rethink the way we consume, to reduce the amount we consume and especially the amount we waste. What measures do you think we can take to reduce the amount of food waste that we generate? Your answers might include things like planning our shopping more carefully and planning meals in advance, also doing smaller shops and buying food as we go. We could use local shops or even grow some of our own food. How many of you have an allotment, for example? Here's a challenge. Why don't you write a week of meal plans and then see if you can save money on the weekly shop? So now, with the 6 R's in mind, let's have a go at task 3, fill in the gaps. Once again, if you'd like to, you can press pause to allow time to complete the task, and then press play to continue. We asked you to use the words in the list below to fill in the gaps in the following sentences. So let's have a look. Learn to repair your bike so that you can mend any punctures you get and keep it working well. We are starting to rethink the way we buy food products, and some people now refuse to buy any fruit and veg that's packaged. We must all drastically reduce the amount of single-use plastics we use. If you must buy products in plastic bottles, you can recycle many of them, but remember, you can often also reuse them, for example as a vase or for watering plants, like in the picture on the right. Well done if you got those. It might feel like a long way away at the moment, but some of you may be dreaming of the types of jobs you would like one day. And it's really important that you know that sustainable jobs come in all shapes and sizes. You might think, oh well, a sustainable job is just working in renewable energy, for example, but actually there's a lot more to it and lots of other areas it covers, for example from design and engineering, right the way to farming and science and food technology and much, much more than that. For example, how might a fashion designer play a vital role in a sustainable future? Well, as a fashion designer, you could choose to use sustainably sourced fabrics and design high-quality items that were made to last, or to be disassembled and reused after their first life. You could choose to make sure that your items were manufactured sustainably, locally, and by operatives who were fairly paid and looked after. You could even have the power to change the way the consumer thinks about their clothing and offer advice on care and mending. I did mention sustainable energy. Why do you think there may be more jobs in sustainable energy in the future? This is because it's a growing industry. As more solar and wind farms are built, more hydropower and geothermal plants created, there will inevitably be more jobs in all areas from engineering and design to construction, marketing, management, monitoring, and so on. Whatever it is you're excited about or interested in, your skills and creativity are going to be in demand. Electric vehicles, or EVs, are a growth industry. So, electrical engineers of the future could work in the automotive industry, improving the design of electric vehicles. Technology is changing all the time, and so they would be required to have a huge range of skills. Their skills then could mean that they might be able to work in other sustainable industries, like renewable energy or building design, even things like virtual or augmented reality. Do you think that more employers will be looking for people with these types of skills in the future? And if so, why? Well, as times change, our needs change, and technologies change too, and employers will look for creative people who can put the two together, finding technologies that meet our needs and changing lifestyles. We're going to have a look now at Task 4, My Green Job. The challenge is to design your ultimate sustainable green job. So, think of what you would really like to do and how that job could be made to contribute to a sustainable future. Now, it's important to be imaginative, but also don't hold back. If there's something you'd really like to do, but it might not seem an obviously sustainable green job, I'm sure there is a way you could make it one, so have a good think. We're asking you to present your ideas in the table provided on the worksheet. Then, I suggest if you can, you explain and compare your ideas with your classmates. Finally, you must be able to describe what it is that makes your job sustainable. This can take some thinking about, but I'm sure you can be creative. Good luck. This might take a little time, so to allow yourselves that, do press pause, and then when you're ready, press play to continue watching the presentation. So I can imagine some really exciting jobs that you might have come up with, and I'm just sad I can't be there to discuss them with you, but I hope you have had a chance to discuss them. So here's my example, and I've gone back to the fashion designer example that we talked about a little bit earlier, just because it's something different. So my job description is, I would be designing clothes that would be modern and practical and stylish. I would sketch ideas and also use computer-aided design. I would work with manufacturers, retailers, models and photographers to produce and promote my designs. And I would work as a member of a team. Now that sounds pretty much like any fashion designer, doesn't it? So let's move on to the next aspect. It would contribute to a sustainable future because, as a fashion designer, I would ensure that my clothes were made from sustainable or recycled materials, and I would research materials that could be recycled or composted. That's after the end of their life. I would ensure my designs were manufactured by people who were paid fairly and worked in good conditions. I would make sure the quality of my clothes was high and not fast fashion, encouraging consumers to take care of them. Other jobs I could do with these skills include stylist, retailer, magazine journalist, costume designer, jewellery designer, artist, theatre designer, the list goes on. The point is that virtually any job done the right way can work towards a sustainable future. I hope you enjoyed coming up with your green dream job. So let's have a recap and see what you've learnt this lesson. Can you name all of the 6 R's? Well done if you can. We've got refuse, reuse, recycle, rethink, repair and reduce. What is the term used for a community of living organisms? The term is an ecosystem. What 2 results of climate change, starting with D, can destroy habitats? The 2 Ds are deforestation and desertification. What term is used when a group of animals or plants has died out? It's that sad word, extinction. And finally, can you suggest 2 social issues that need to be addressed to ensure sustainable development? Well, you might have said healthcare or education or economic sustainability. Well done for sticking with it this lesson. There's a lot to listen to and a lot to learn, but also hopefully a lot to be positive about and something to inspire you too. Although this is the 6th and final lesson in this pack, we will be doing more lessons and hope you'll join us in the future. In the meantime, I really hope you feel inspired to make your own future more sustainable, but also to help others do so too. It's great if you can talk to your friends and family about it. And finally, we really hope that when you're able to, you'll be able to come and visit us at Westmill. We'd really love to show you the wind farm and the solar park. Thank you for listening and having a go at the tasks and activities. Happy sustainable future.